The wind had stopped, and that was the first sign. In the mountain villages of Norway, silence is never a good thing. When the wind stops howling through the fjords, when the snow ceases its relentless dance against the wooden shutters, the old ones know. They know that something is listening. That winter of 1924, the people of Havaldren village learned this truth in the hardest way possible. His name was Erik Johansen, and on the night of December 17th, he walked into a snowstorm that would become legend. But this story doesn't begin with his disappearance. It begins 50 years later, when two hikers found something that shouldn't exist. The summer of 1974 arrived late in the mountains. Margit Halvorsen and her brother Thomas had been climbing the northern ridge of Kvitfjell when Thomas noticed something dark against the eternal white. At first, he thought it was a boulder, one of those ancient stones that rise from the snow like the bones of sleeping giants. But as they approached, the shape became unmistakably human. The body was perfectly preserved, locked in ice like an insect trapped in amber. Margit would later tell the authorities that she felt no fear when she first saw the frozen man. Instead, she felt a strange sense of recognition, as if she had been waiting her entire life to find him. His wool coat was thick with frost, his face turned slightly to the side, eyes closed as if in peaceful sleep. In his right hand, he clutched a leather notebook. The police arrived by helicopter the next morning. They brought the body down carefully, reverently, as if they were handling something sacred rather than tragic. In the village, the old ones gathered in the square, whispering among themselves. Some of them were old enough to remember, old enough to know. Erik Johansen had been 28 years old when he vanished. He left behind a young wife named Astrid, and a daughter he had never met, born 3 months after his disappearance. The official reports had concluded that he died in the storm, his body likely buried under avalanche snow, lost forever to the mountain. But now he had returned. In the small morgue of Haldren village, Dr. Lars Bergström examined the body with scientific curiosity mixed with something deeper, something that made his hands tremble slightly as he worked. The preservation was remarkable. Erik's skin held the texture of freezer burn, but his features remained distinct. More remarkable still was the notebook, still gripped in his frozen fingers. It took 2 hours of careful warming before they could pry the notebook free without damaging it. The leather cover was stiff, darkened by ice and time, but intact. Dr. Bergström opened it carefully, aware that every person in the room had stopped breathing. The last entry was dated December 17th, 1924. The handwriting was rushed but legible, the words pressed hard into the paper as if written in desperate urgency. If anyone finds this, know that I am not afraid. What I have seen tonight has shown me that there are things in this world, in these mountains, that exist beyond our understanding. The light in the valley is not the northern lights. It does not move like them. It breathes. It pulses like a heartbeat. And it is calling to me. The room remained silent as Bergström read. Outside, the summer sun hung low in the sky, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of gold and amber. But inside that small room, everyone felt the chill of that winter night, 50 years past. I should turn back. Astrid is waiting. Our child will be born soon. But I cannot turn back. Something has changed in the air. The wind has stopped, and I know with a certainty I cannot explain, that if I do not go toward that light, if I do not understand what it is, I will regret it for the rest of my life. There were more entries before this final one, spanning the 3 days of his journey. Bergström flipped back to the beginning, to the first entry dated December 14th. Left the village at dawn. The storm predictions are concerning, but I have promised the Svensson family I will bring medicine to their farm before winter truly sets in. The path is familiar. I have walked it 100 times. Nothing unusual there. Erik had been the village's primary courier during winter months, one of the few young men strong enough and brave enough to make the dangerous trek between isolated farms when snow closed the roads. It was honest work, necessary work. The second entry, December 15th, showed the first signs that something was different. Stayed the night at the Svensson farm. Old Magnus told me a story before bed, one I had never heard before. He said that when he was a boy, his grandfather spoke of lights in the northern valley, lights that appeared only once every 50 years. His grandfather called them the Watchers. He said they were neither good nor evil, but that they were waiting for something or someone. I laughed at the story, but Magnus did not laugh with me. He looked at me with eyes that seemed too old for his face and said, "The wind knows when they come." The wind always stops. Bergström paused in his reading. Around him, the assembled group, 2 police officers, the village priest, and 3 council members, leaned closer. One of the council members, a woman in her 70s, named Solveig Andersen, made a small sound in her throat. "What is it?" Bergström asked. "My grandmother," Solveig said quietly. "She told me the same story, about the Watchers. I thought it was just old superstition, the kind of tale meant to keep children from wandering too far from home in winter." "When did she tell you this?" the priest asked. 1924, Solveig answered. "The winter that Erik Johansen disappeared." The room grew colder, though the heater hummed steadily in the corner. Bergström continued reading, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. December 16th. Left the Svensson farm at first light. The storm has not yet arrived, but the sky has taken on a strange quality, a kind of pressure that sits behind the eyes. I decided to take the high path rather than the valley route. It adds several hours to the journey, but something about the valley felt wrong this morning. Magnus stood in his doorway as I left, and I heard him say something, though I pretend I did not. He said, "The wind has stopped." And he was right. There was no wind. By afternoon, I reached the shepherd's hut on the ridge. I planned to rest here for a few hours before making the final push home. But as I prepared to sleep, I saw it for the first time. Down in the valley, where no farms exist, where no roads lead, a light, not a fire, not a lantern, something else. It moved like water, flowing across the snow, and where it touched, the darkness seemed to pull back, as if afraid. I should leave now. I should run home while there is still daylight. But I find myself unable to look away. The light is beautiful. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. The entry ended there. Dr. Bergström turned to the final page, to the words Erik had written in his last moments of consciousness. "I am in the valley now. The light surrounds me, but I am not afraid. I understand now why Magnus's grandfather called them Watchers. They are not things. They are not beings. They are attention itself, the awareness of the mountain, the consciousness of the snow and stone. They have been here since before humans came to these valleys, and they will be here long after we are gone. The light is showing me things, moments from my life that I had forgotten. My mother singing to me when I was small, the first time I saw Astrid, at the midsummer festival, with flowers in her hair. The moment I learned she was pregnant, all of it playing out before me like scenes from a play. But there are other things too, things that haven't happened yet. I see my daughter, grown, with children of her own. I see the village 50 years from now, 100 years from now. I see the mountains as they were before the ice, and as they will be after it melts. Time is not what I thought it was. The watchers exist outside of it, or perhaps alongside it, watching the river of moments flow past. They are asking me something. I can feel the question, though there are no words. They want to know if I am ready. Ready for what? I do not know. But I feel that if I say yes, I will understand. I will see what they see. I will know what they know. I think of Astrid. I think of our child, who I will never meet. I think of the life I am leaving behind. And yet I cannot help but feel that this is why I came into the world. Not to live a simple life in a simple village, but to answer this question, to take this step into the unknown. The cold is coming now. I can feel it in my bones. The watchers are fading, pulling back like the tide. I think I have made them sad, or perhaps disappointed. I chose to stay human. I chose to hold on to my memories, my love, my fear. I chose mortality over eternity. The storm is starting. The wind has returned, and with it, the snow. I should have left hours ago. I will not make it home. But I am not afraid. I have seen something that few people ever see. I have stood in the presence of something vast and ancient and utterly indifferent to human suffering, and I chose love over transcendence. If Astrid finds this, tell her I thought of her at the end. Tell her our daughter will be beautiful. Tell her I am sorry I was not strong enough to walk away from the light. The cold is here now. I can no longer feel my hands. The notebook is falling. I am falling. The snow is singing. I never knew snow could sing. The final words trailed off, the handwriting becoming shaky, uncertain. And then nothing. Dr. Bergstrom closed the notebook carefully. No one spoke. Outside, the summer evening had deepened, the sun finally dipping below the mountain peaks, leaving the village in that strange twilight that lasts for hours in the Norwegian summer. He died chasing a fairy tale, one of the police officers finally said, his voice uncertain, as if he didn't quite believe his own words. Did he? Solveig Andersen asked. Or did he die after seeing something real that we simply don't have the language to describe? The priest cleared his throat. We should inform the family. His daughter, she would be 50 years old now. She lives in Oslo, I believe. She has a right to know that her father has been found. His wife? Bergstrom asked. Astrid died 15 years ago, Solveig said softly. She never remarried. She told me once that she knew Erik had seen something extraordinary that night, something that had called to him. She said she couldn't be angry at him for following that call, because she knew it was something that transcended their love, their life together. She said she understood. How could she understand? The police officer asked. He abandoned her and their child to chase lights in the snow. Because, Solveig said, meeting his eyes, some of us are born to live simple lives, and some of us are born to answer questions that the rest of humanity is too afraid to ask. Erik Johansen was one of the latter. The meeting concluded with arrangements to contact Erik's daughter, to hold a proper funeral, to finally lay to rest the man who had been missing for 50 years. But as the group dispersed into the endless summer twilight, each person carried with them the weight of Erik's words, the image of those mysterious lights, the question that had no answer. Inga Johansen arrived in Haldren 3 days later. She was a professor of anthropology at the University of Oslo. A woman with her father's dark hair streaked with grey, her mother's sharp eyes. She had never known Erik, had grown up with only stories and a single photograph of a young man smiling at the camera, his arm around a laughing woman with flowers in her hair. Dr. Bergstrom gave her the notebook in his office, away from the curious eyes of the village. She held it for a long moment before opening it, her hands steady, her face unreadable. "My mother told me about the lights," she said finally, not looking up from the notebook. "She said that the night I was born, the northern lights were the brightest anyone had ever seen. But she also said there was something else in the sky that night, something that moved wrong, that pulsed instead of flowed. She said she knew at that moment that my father was gone, not dead, but gone. She said she could feel him pulled away, like a tide pulling back from the shore." "You believe her?" Bergstrom asked gently. "I'm a scientist," Inga said. "I've spent my life studying human cultures, human beliefs, the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of a chaotic world. I know that lights in the sky are explainable. Aurora borealis, ball lightning, optical illusions caused by ice crystals in the atmosphere. I know all of this." She opened the notebook, her eyes scanning her father's handwriting. "But I also know that every culture on Earth has stories about lights that call to people, about places where the veil between our world and something else grows thin. The Aboriginal Australians speak of song lines, the Native Americans of spirit roads, the Celts of thin places. What if they're all describing the same phenomenon? What if there are places where consciousness itself becomes visible, where the attention of the universe can be felt and seen?" She read in silence for several minutes, turning pages carefully, her expression never changing. When she reached the final entry, she stopped, her finger resting on the last words Erik had written. "The snow is singing. I want to see where he was found," she said. They hiked to the location the next morning. Inger and Bergstrom and a guide named Kjell, who knew the mountains better than he knew his own home. The summer had been kind to the peaks, melting back the snow to reveal grey stone and patches of hardy alpine flowers. But the place where Erik had been found remained cold, shaded by the steep walls of the valley, never touched by direct sunlight. Inga stood at the spot where her father had lain for 50 years, looking down at the valley below. From this height, she could see the entirety of the northern valley, a long sweep of snow and stone that ended in a distant glacier. "He was facing this direction when we found him," Kjell said, pointing down the valley. His eyes were closed, but his body was positioned as if he had been walking toward something, had perhaps stopped to rest, and simply never woke up. "The notebook said the lights were in the valley," Inga said. "Do strange lights appear here often?" "The northern lights, yes," Kjell answered. "But my grandfather told me about other lights, ones that appeared in the valley itself rather than in the sky. He saw them once when he was a young man. 1924, actually, the same winter your father disappeared. He said they moved like living things, like shoals of luminous fish swimming through the air. He said they made no sound, but that he could feel them, like a vibration in his chest." "Did he follow them?" Inga asked. "He started to," Kjell said, "but his father, my great-grandfather, grabbed him and pulled him back, told him that some calls are not meant to be answered, that the mountains have their secrets and only fools try to uncover them. My grandfather always wondered what would have happened if he had followed those lights. He wondered until the day he died." They stood in silence, the wind picking up around them, carrying the scent of snow and stone. Inga closed her eyes, trying to imagine what her father had felt in this place, what he had seen that had been worth dying for. "I want to stay here tonight," she said suddenly. "I want to see if the lights return." Bergstrom started to protest, but Inga cut him off. "I'm not a child, and I'm not reckless, but I need to understand. My mother spent her entire life waiting for my father to come home, and even when it was clear he never would, she never stopped believing that what he had seen was real. I owe it to both of them to at least try to see what he saw. The lights appear only once every 50 years, Shell said quietly, according to the old stories. And it's been 50 years, Inga said, hasn't it? The men exchanged glances. Finally, Bergstrom nodded. I'll stay with you, he said, but if a storm comes, we leave immediately. No arguments. They made camp as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. In the summer, the sun never fully set in these latitudes, merely dipping low before rising again, creating a prolonged twilight that stretched for hours. They ate a simple dinner of dried meat and bread, drank hot coffee from a thermos, and waited. At first, there was nothing. The valley remained as it had been, silent and cold and utterly ordinary. Inga found herself thinking about her mother, about the stories she had told. Astrid had never remarried, had devoted herself to raising Inga alone, working as a seamstress, living a quiet life. But she had never been bitter, never spoke ill of Erik for leaving them. He was called, Astrid would say, when Inga asked about her father. Some people are born to answer calls that the rest of us cannot hear. Your father was one of those people. I loved him for it, even though it meant I had to let him go. Inga had never understood those words as a child. They seemed like the rationalization of a woman trying to make sense of abandonment. But now, sitting in the cold shadow of the mountain where her father had died, she began to understand. The first light appeared just after midnight. It started as a faint glow in the valley below, barely visible against the residual twilight. At first, Inga thought it might be moonlight, reflecting off snow, but the moon was hidden behind clouds. The glow intensified slowly, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded her of breathing. Do you see it? She whispered. Bergstrom nodded, his face pale in the strange light. God help me, I see it. The light began to move, flowing up the valley like water flowing uphill, defying gravity and logic. As it approached, Inga could see that it wasn't a single light, but thousands of them, tiny points of luminescence that moved in coordination, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly, geometries that seemed to exist in more dimensions than her eyes could process. She felt it then, the question her father had written about. It came not as words, but as a sensation, a gentle pressure against her consciousness, an invitation to step forward, to understand, to see. And she wanted to. God, how she wanted to. She could feel the pull of it, the promise of knowledge, of understanding that transcended human limitations. She thought of her father standing in this same spot 50 years ago, feeling this same pull, making his choice. But she also thought of her mother, alone in their small apartment, sewing by lamplight, waiting for a man who would never return. She thought of all the years of questions, of wondering, of the daughter who grew up without a father because he had chosen mystery over family. No, she said aloud, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to the lights or to herself. No, I can't. The lights paused in their approach. The pressure against her mind intensified, not forceful, but insistent, asking again, offering again. She could see things in the light now, images flickering like scenes from a film. Her father as a young man, laughing. Her mother with flowers in her hair. Herself as a baby. And other things, stranger things, cities that didn't exist. People with faces that weren't quite human. Landscapes that couldn't be Earth, but somehow were. I understand why he followed you, Inga said, tears streaming down her face. The